there's a bleed here. Anyway, I sent Michael's bio, and I have been blessed in my life to have some very special friends, and mutual friends of Michael and Jack's and me were friends of David's and mine. And after David passed away, they invited me over for a movie and popcorn night, and Jack and Michael were there, and they said, Barbara, this is my gift to you. And it has indeed turned out to be that kind of friendship, comfortable from the get-go. One point, and this was true friendship, when I couldn't reach any of my doctors and I was scared stiff that I had a thrombosis or something, I called Jack and I called Michael. I said, should I be worried? And they went through the details, no problem, saw the doctor the next day. The other joy of this is having a close friend who's a clinician who looks like Freud. So it's tremendous security that things will be well analyzed. So I'm going to turn things over to you.
All right. I may look like I'm Freud, but I don't think like Freud. And on a system like this technology, I'm really feeling a little insecure, but we're gonna give it a go. So, okay, for those of you who don't know, I'm Michael Schur. Welcome to my love letter to Paris, because that's pretty much what this turned out to be. By way of introduction and providing a little context for my talk, I'm originally from Wisconsin. I was raised in a small Midwestern town, and I did my undergraduate work at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. When I began my college work, as many students do, I was a little confused and unfocused. Therefore, after my second year, I thought about taking a gap year. I thought it would be a good idea. But this wasn't done a lot back then. This was back in the early 60s. But my mother and grandfather, who were very supportive, approved of the idea, although my grandfather said you have to have a goal. He said you can go over, you can stay as long as you want, but I want you to accomplish something. You know, be focused. So since my mother's family came from Luxembourg, and at the time I liked my French instructors on campus, I talked it over with one of them who I was particularly close to, and decided that I would study French at the Institute of Touraine in Tours, where supposedly the purest French was spoken. So this is my first visit in Paris at of course a sidewalk cafe overlooking the Seine. When I arrived in Paris, this was in the early 60s, I had only my preconceptions of France to guide me. Preconceptions formed from hearsay and reading various authors whom I now think of as being my ghost guides. The City of Light proved to be all of that and more. This is for you, Joseph. This is Nijinsky's grave in Père Lachaise.
I've never seen it, never seen a photo, nothing.
No, that's why I remember our conversation. And as I was going through my memories, I thought of how Jack and I were so impressed at the sculpture on this, and I must have taken 10 pictures of it. So I thought I would share it with you so you could see it. It's just marvelous.
It is marvelous, yeah.
Yes. So while I was in tour, I made several trips to Paris, including a short residential stay where we followed a course on Degas at the Sorbonne. It was clear relatively early on that I was to have a relationship with Paris, which has lasted now for over 50 years. To this day, I cannot tell you how many times I've been to Paris or everything I've done and seen there, but I can tell you that, like another Michael, Michel de Montaigne, the 16th century Renaissance philosopher
Yes.
and essayist, has said, and I think much better than I, but I still get emotional when I read this. I read this for the first time, oh my God, 55 or 60 years ago. But it's basically, Paris has my heart since childhood, and like other excellent things, has retained its hold on me ever since. The more beautiful towns I have seen them, the more strongly the beauty of this one has established its claim to my affection. I love it for itself and more in its own being than when overlaid with external pomp. I love it tenderly, even with its warts and blemishes. I am French only through this great town, great by its people, great by the happiness of its situation, great especially and beyond compare by the variety and diversity of its conveniences. It is indeed the glory of France and one of the most noble ornaments of the world. God protect it from our quarrels and divisions. And when I read this the first time, I thought of the French temperament, which can be very argumentative and combative. And of course, we see now, 500 years later, we see the strikes and we see some of the same concerns that Montaigne had 500 years ago. So one of the things that I liked most about being in Paris, I discovered early on, was the interaction of events, the possibility of experiencing something on many different layers, one complementing and enriching the next, but always with an element of discovery attached to it. So being a good student, I would visit a monument. Here we have Notre Dame, one of my favorite. This was before the fire, of course. I would study it, walk around it, try to experience it, try to get to its meaning or importance, and thus enlightened, I would go on to another museum or ruin where often I would find out more about the previous event. When this included actually touching a stone or a physical remnant, I was even more seduced by it, and it could change my thinking to such a degree that I found myself channeling these events in my imagination, and I was creating for myself this 3D Technicolor history book.
Wow.
I think in my mind was becoming a Disneyland of history. And as an example, this is kind of hard to explain, but as an example, I'm going to spend a little time here. I would like to briefly relate to you my first experience to the Cathedral of Notre Dame, our Gothic icon. The cathedral is usually so full of tourists that in any place or time, Quasimodo could walk through without being noticed. And that is how I usually visited a museum or a cathedral, basically as a tourist. So I went to Notre Dame, I looked at the cathedral, I tried to recall its history other than its having been begun in 1163. I spent some time walking around, going up to the top of the tower to see the city from the turret and to get a closer look at the gargoyles, all the while trying to get a feeling for its essence as this great Gothic structure, not yet knowing that this understanding would come, but that it would take time and many experiences. Leaving the cathedral, I started to explore the city. So at the time, I spent the next couple of days focusing on Napoleon and Josephine, which is where my interests were at the time. I walked over to the Latin Quarter And this is the Pantheon from Rue Mouffetard on my way over to the student section by the Sorbonne. And I visited the house where Napoleon lived as a teenage student at the military school. He was 16, by the way, when he entered École Militaire. He was the youngest graduate at 17 in artillery that ever went through the system. Then I walked over to the Palais Royal and Cardinal Richelieu's palatial domicile before it became a royal palace. And I walked through the arcades, the famous arcades where Napoleon met the lady of the evening to whom he lost his virginity when he was 18. And God knows, how did anybody document that? But I read it 4 different places, all reliable sources, which I thought was a stitch. Then I went to the street where Josephine lived and entertained Napoleon. But right now, before they were married, everything is gone. It was called Hotel de Charlène, and it was torn down to make way for Haussmann's renovations in the 19th century. Then, oops, I hit the wrong button. What did I do? There we go. Okay, thank goodness. Okay, then I walked over to the church whose religious cells, I don't have a picture of this. I walked over to the cells of a church. It was actually a convent whose religious cells became a prison during the Reign of Terror, and where Josephine was imprisoned by Robespierre because she was an aristocrat. And she wrote on the wall, which is still there, "O liberty, when will you cease to be a vain word? We have been today shut up for 17 days. We are told that we shall be let out tomorrow. But is this not a vain hope?" And I can't tell you the chill I got when I touched that. I mean, when you see that written by the person, it was so moving that it was unbelievable. So then I visited the place where Josephine waited 2 hours for her intended husband to show up for their civil marriage service. That is the building now. The site has changed. It is a thoroughly bureaucratic building, but even here they have this plaque attesting to the mayor of the second arrondissement celebrate 9th March 1796, the marriage of General Bonaparte to Josephine Beauharnais. So it's attesting to the importance of the site as historically significant for the marriage of Napoleon. I also spent time at the Louvre, where I was mesmerized by David's official portrait of Napoleon's coronation in Notre Dame in 1804, which caused me to spend more time afterwards reading about the ceremony. And I just want to point out that this was in Notre Dame, and this is how the Napoleon had the cathedral fitted out. And in addition to this elaborate, luxurious accommodations, they had musicians and they had bands marching and they had individual entertainers playing for individual guests. And it was a terribly elaborate affair. One of the authors that I read about back then said he was the best propagandist that ever existed. He did such a job. This was such a job. This was such a mind job on the French. Because first of all, if he were truly a king, he wouldn't be in Notre Dame. He would be in Rennes. He wanted to break that tradition. He wanted to show that he was somebody else. He was more important. He was going to be not a king. He knew very clearly that he was going to be the emperor. He was going to be something new. This was a new day for France. And I think this was a very effective, production. So anyway, shortly after this, I happened to return to Notre Dame. It was just by accident. I went because I was with a friend who hadn't seen it yet, thank goodness. As I re-entered the church, I thought I was in the wrong place. This certainly wasn't the same church that I had seen just a few days earlier. As I looked around, the light was golden, and I was hearing 2 full orchestras with 4 choruses, 3 military bands playing heroic marches, 200 musicians entertaining guests. In addition, a 400-voice choir was performing Pesallo's Mass and Te Deum. It was like I was going crazy, stereophonic, psychosis here. You might have guessed, I'm a little dramatic, but you might have guessed this is exactly what happened at the coronation of Napoleon. And my seeing the David painting and experiencing all of those Bonaparte and Josephine's experiences before coming back so impressed me that my perception of the cathedral was altered completely. It was like I was seeing the place for the first time. And this is basically what Paris does for me. It has the power to blend the past and the present, bringing all of its glory and significance to bear on the moment, which all the while life moves, slowly evolving in a way that keeps the city fresh, but it somehow retains the essence of itself, and that is what is recognizable and lovable. And again, I think an example, a more contemporary example, is the installation of the pyramid, and how at first that was such a controversial element, and now it has become a classic, as much of a classic as anything else. Okay, just as Montaigne was writing in his essays, another of Paris's current icons was being built, the Pont Neuf, or the New Bridge. It was originally made of stone and wood. In the 1600s, it was restored to what you see now. It is paradoxically called the New Bridge, but it's Paris's oldest extant bridge. Wow. If you look at the statue over between the 2 lights on the bridge, there's a black statue. It is Henry IV. He was called the Vert Galant. He was one of France's favorite kings, and he was indeed a very gallant aristocrat ruler. Across the street, behind the building on the right, is the oldest part of Paris, where there are remnants of the Middle Ages in the Place Dauphine. Okay, this is, for me, it's one of my favorite parts of Paris, because it's probably the place where you come the closest to actually touching the Middle Ages. It's quite a remarkable, for me, it's quite a remarkable experience, even though some of the restorations have not been kind. This is a view towards the left bank from the Vert Galant. You're looking over, still the Pont Neuf. You're looking over the south branch of the river, and what you're seeing is a section of metal grating put up by the city for the lovelocks. Have you heard of the lovelocks? You know what they are?
Yeah.
The padlocks couples like to leave behind as a testament to their love. This started on the Pont des Arts down by the Louvre in 2008 and caught the imagination of the public in such a way that the city had to ban the practice after removing the bridge railing because they were so heavy. I mean, there were stands along the river where people were selling padlocks, and people would carve. You see, they would carve their names, and they would keep finding ways of attaching the padlocks. So the city finally came to start mounting these portable grids, and you can see after a while they fill up, and then they will accommodate the people, but they can remove them easily too. So we're talking about here bridges. Bridges are play an important role in Paris, and the city is cut in half by the Seine. Into the right side is the right bank, and the left side is the left bank. It is crisscrossed by 37. Whoops! It is crisscrossed by 37 bridges, which weave the city into a whole. 13 of them connect the island, Ile Saint-Louis and Ile de la Cité, where Paris began and is still its heart. It's really hard to talk about bridges because in Paris, the bridges are more, there we go, more significant than their functional component. The function, of course, is to move a person to facilitate the other, but in Paris, this is more about communication. The bridges are more about communication writ in large letters. They have a character of their own that adds to the aura of the city. They form a pattern of synapses. In my professional life, to understand patterns of behavior, I would have to look beyond the obvious. I have to look under the obvious to discern motivation. It was the same here. To understand the importance or the significance of these bridges, I would have to go down and I would have to go to see the underside of the bridges, and it was amazing what a difference it made to my whole perception, my understanding. You began to see more of a skeleton of a city. You saw its structure. You saw the foundations of the bridges. You became aware of the span. You became aware of the material and the art going into its design, and how exciting it was. It changed everything. Or maybe it was because my father was a contractor, that I was so curious about how things fit together.
Probably.
Pardon?
Probably.
There was but I mean, I'm always looking to see what makes something up. So this here is the Pont au Change. It runs along the border of the 1st arrondissement and the 4th arrondissement, or it connects the Conciergerie on the Ile de la Cité with the Place du Châtelet on the right bank. This is just down the stream from the Pont Neuf. This also is the latest iteration of the bridge because there have been several on the site. Now, the stories that you get from being down here, being by the bridges, being close to them, getting to know them. Where did the bridge get its name? The bridge was named for the money changers that established themselves here in the 12th century, which I find, Philippe Auguste, I mean, this was there this has been here a long time. There's been something here a long time. How could they do that? Because back then there were buildings on the bridges that could be used for business. This beautiful version was built in 1860. What does the N stand for? If you think that the N is for Napoleon, you are both right and wrong. It is not for Napoleon Bonaparte. It is the imperial insignia for Napoleon III, Napoleon Bonaparte's nephew and the emperor of the Third Empire. By the way, this is the bridge that Hugo has Inspector Javert throwing himself off into the Seine in Les Miserables when he cannot resolve the conflict he is having about Jean Valjean. Oh, the Seine and its bridges. Here is another bridge farther downstream. It's the Pont au Double, or the double bridge, with its copper skin looking up from the Riverside Walk. Did you even know there was a copper finished bridge in Paris? Nobody does. I didn't know. So you notice the detail. Being down on the riverside, I mean, you notice the detail. It changes your perspective. You notice the detail. Another story. Where did this weird name come from? At one time, there were 2 hospitals here, and one had to pay a double fee to get into them. Capitalism had its excesses even back then. So now we go up to the street. You can see how crowded it is, what a difference it makes being down by the river and up on the street. What a difference, how little time and space there is for observation and appreciation. If you stop for a comment or photograph, you block someone else's way. Go back down to the riverside, turn back and look up. There you see Notre Dame. It's still there, it's monumental, but with a different presence. Seeing it in the setting along the river puts it more in balance for me. I think in this way that it becomes more accessible. When I think of it now, I don't think of it as much as this beautiful, big, monumental Gothic church that's so huge. I think of it more as a parishional church sitting alongside of a river that is serving the needs of a diocese, a large group of people. I find that in the city, more than other places I've been, where you are, I mean, where you put yourself really determines not only what you see, but how you see it. The city can tell many stories, but under its bridges, here especially, you begin to hear the murmur of its life. So here, the Seine is the heart and soul of the city. Perhaps this is why people come here to reflect, to ponder, to relax, to share life, to enhance love, or to try to forget it. The quiet moments are many on the benches and the rest areas along the quay. I just wanted to point out, this picture, you see it's a road. All right, it's not well landscaped. It's a road. The mayor of Paris has taken away all the traffic. This used to be an express exit to the west, to the east of the city, and she stopped the traffic to allow people to begin to be next to the river so that they could hear the river. They could see the traffic. They could begin to put their experiences in the city into a more personal space. And I think it's right now it's just it's a wonderful, you can walk under the bridges, you can walk completely along the river for, I think it's like 4 or 5 miles, and there's no traffic. There's just some bikes, some scooters, but mainly it's all pedestrian. So this is another view of Pont-Neuf. This is going over, again, the south side of the Seine, but from the riverside. I'm reminded of all those who have been here before me. One of them, the poet Guillaume Apollinaire, wrote a poem. He wrote around the turn of the century, what is known as the Belle Époque. He was a bon vivant and was associated with a group of artists called the Cubists. His love, Marie Laurencin, yes, the same woman that was involved with Picasso and his friends, lived on the right bank. Here is a painting by Marie Laurencin of her Salon. And I picked this particularly for us because it was her salon with Apollinaire in the middle
Nice.
and her friends. So I guess salons have been around for quite a while. Apollinaire lived on the left bank, so every time that he wanted to see Marie, he had to take the Pont Mirabeau. This is the Pont Mirabeau. This, by the way, is another. It's very famous. This is almost complete. It's almost out of Paris. It's on the far western side. It was named after a young revolutionary who was a small aristocrat, and it's famous for the sculpture. There are 4 sculptures at the 4 corners, and they're all allegorical. One is for navigation, one is for commerce, one is for, oh, I forgot. But they're really quite beautiful. And you can also see the structure, talking about understanding structure of the bridges. You can see and understand the beautiful engineering of so many of the bridges, the supports and the strength of it. It's a wonderful creation. So this is Pont Mirabeau. As luck would have it, Apollinaire broke up with Marie, driving Apollinaire into despair and to the Pont Mirabeau to mourn, to grieve, and to write about it. So now the bridge becomes not only functionally and culturally important, but it becomes a metaphor in his writing, in his poem, a metaphor for life. And the river becomes a metaphor for love and time. I would like you to indulge me for just a minute. I want to read to you what he wrote. It's one of my favorite poems, and you're going to find out how terrible my French is. But I love how it sounds. I still to this day. I was like 19 when I learned the language. But okay, so here we go. Pont Mirabeau. Sous le pont Mirabeau coule le Seine, et nos amours, faut-il qu'il m'en souvienne, la joie venait toujours après la peine. Viennent la nuit, sonne l'heure, les jours s'en vont, là je demeure. Les mains dans les mains, restons face à face, tandis que sous le pont de nos bras passent des éternels regards, l'onde se lasse. Viennent la nuit, sonne l'heure, les jours s'en vont, je demeure. L'amour s'en va comme cette eau courante, l'amour s'en va comme la vie est lente, et comme l'espérance est violente. God, that's so beautiful. Vient la nuit, sonne l'heure, les jours s'en vont, je demeure. Passent les jours et passent les semaines, ni temps passé, ni les amours reviennent sur le pont Mirabeau coule le Seine. Vient la nuit, sonne l'heure, les jours s'en vont, je demeure. And I think, without even knowing French, I could sit and I could listen to that all afternoon. But here's my translation. This isn't quite, I'm going to do the best I can. When I was an undergraduate, my favorite course, when I came back from France, was a translation course with Dr. Bray. And she was, it was a real experience. Okay, so my translation, Pont Mirabeau. Under the bridge Mirabeau flows the Seine and our loves. I must remember that joy always comes after pain. Let the night come, the hour sounds, the days go by, yet I remain. Hand in hand, let us stay face to face while under the bridge our arms make past the weary waves' timeless gaze. What a phrase, isn't that wonderful? Past the weary waves' timeless gaze. Let the night come, the hour sounds, the days go by, yet I remain. Love passes like this flowing water. Love goes by. How slow life seems, and how tenacious is hope. Let the night come, the hour sounds, the days go by, yet I remain. Days pass, weeks go by, neither the past nor love's return. Under the bridge Mirabeau flows the Seine. Let the night come, the hour sounds, the days go by, yet I remain. Is that beautiful or what? Irony of ironies, Apollinaire died in the flu epidemic of 1918.
No.
Yes. And I didn't realize that until I was looking up a date I wanted, and it said he passed away. He had the flu. He died of the flu. He was a modern poet. He didn't use punctuation. He was a Parisian in the sense of his direct confrontation of the real world, which is something we're going to see later. He uses words to try to get at the essence of life, of the essence of what is, of what the core meaning of life was. I found another poet that I read a long time ago in my activist days, Audre Lorde. She's a Black female writer who describes this effort a different way, and I just thought it was kind of relevant here. She says, poetry is not dream and vision. It is the skeletal architecture of our lives. It lays the foundation for a future of change, a bridge across our fears of what has never been before. I just thought that was a very telling definition. Audre Lorde's. So the same curiosity, moving along, the same curiosity and intensity imbues another significant aspect of life in Paris, and that is food. I love street food of Paris. If you like street food, you will be. How many have been to Paris? Has everybody been to Paris? Yeah, I thought a lot of, it's one of our first stops, isn't it, growing up? It's one of the, London and Paris. Okay, it is concerning the essence of food. I had a guide here in my reading. This is A.J. Liebling, an essayist for Harper's and the New Yorker in the first half of the 20th century. I wanted you to see what he looked like because he was so completely comfortable with who he was. Doesn't he look like he was the third or fourth, maybe the 10th, I don't know. He was in the line of many famous foodies. He is what is called an eater or a feeder. Isn't that a great, would you like to be known as a feeder? I love the word. He writes on food. He thought he needed to eat a lot of it, which suited him well because he loved to eat. Needless to say, AJ did not just eat, he ate for the purpose of looking for real food. Okay, by real food, he meant those good little holes in the wall where you eat for nothing. He found that the food in expensive restaurants was often more a creation of a popular chef than it was an authentic French eating experience. Learning, isn't that, I mean, I think that's relevant today. I mean, this is one of the things I got out of putting my thoughts down on paper. I couldn't get over how modern some of these people are. I mean, for Christ's sake, Montaigne was writing 500 years ago. And what he is saying still pertain to what's going on today. Learning from Maurice Koronsky and Waverly Root, two other gourmand writers of the time, he sought to find the essence of French cuisine. He said, and I quote, "Eating is highly subjective, and the man who accepts other people's opinions, the say-so, so to speak, will wind up in bad and over-touted restaurants in middle age, ordering what the maître d'hôtel suggests. He will have been guided to them by food snob publications, and he will fall into the habit of drinking too much before dinner to kill the taste of what he has been told he shouldn't like, but doesn't. We're told what he should like, but doesn't." Wow. He believed that you needed to look for the tastes that know what they are, that know their own minds. which is the foundation of French cuisine. This, by the way, is a foie gras semi-cuit on a sweet brioche. It is one of the it is one of the classic French dishes, and it is so simple that I can't tell you. And this is the type of food. This is the essence. This is what these people are trying to get to, as opposed to going to Joel Robuchon or all these other these restaurateurs that do all of these famous foods, and now currently famous foods. This translates into finding food that retains its identity, its flavor, that is recognizable on its own. The glory of French cooking is the pot, wrote Alexander Dumas the Elder in his Dictionary Cuisine. French cooking, the first of all cuisines, owns its superiority to the excellence of French bouillon, with beef or chicken or whatever meat, boiled in its juice, was one of the things that a traveler was sure of finding at the lowest inn before the development of two restaurants in the 17th and 18th centuries, where the eternal pot, drawn upon and replenished but never emptied, bubbled on a low fire that was never allowed to die. And this, I just want to put a little, this is so important when it comes to French food, because it is recognizable, recognizes the premier cuisine. It was recognized as the premier cuisine of the world. Comes from the processes of dealing with meats that sometimes were not the finest cuts. That had to be, they were cheap cuts of meat that had to be cooked forever to become edible. And in that process, they created their bouillon, which became the basis for the contemporary French cooking. Another quote by the original gastronomic essayist puts it this way: soup, meaning what we think of today as a pot-au-feu, is at the base of the French national diet, and the experience of centuries has inevitably brought it to perfection. These are the words of Brillat Savarin from Belly, France. He was the founder of the Gourmet Writer and came up with a very famous saying: Dites-moi ce que tu manges, je te dirai ce que tu es. Anybody know what that is? Tell me what you are eating, and I will tell you what you are. Today we would say simply, you are what you eat. So he wrote The Physiology of Taste and The Philosopher in the Kitchen in the early 19th century. Surprise! He was very contemporary in his thinking. Again, he died around 1830. So he was, I think, he was ahead of his time. So anyway, there are so many choices in Paris, temples of gastronomy. I just want to share two that I believe are examples, each one of types of food that have found the essence of French cuisine. That is the food with tastes and flavors that know their own mind and are excellent in quality. The first, Le Tremolo, has been in business for decades. That's the owner, his name is Alain, is from the Auvergne. He bought the place from another Auvergnat, thereby maintaining the tradition. It is right on the quai de l'Hôtel de Ville. It was originally a truck stop. The food is not haute cuisine, but it's considered très correct. Très correct in French means that it is absolutely appropriate. Very, very good rendition of what it should be, what it's supposed to be. Salad frisée. I don't know how many have had salad frisée with bacon lardons and a poached egg. Is a classic. I have not had better. It's just, I could eat that right now. And the other is, this is one of his famous. This is the duck with prunes and The sauce, of course, is a bouillon. The sauce, the au pruneau, it's a rendition of the bouillon that Alexander Dumas is talking about in Brillat Savarin. You know, the French developed the sauces from the bouillon. Okay, so these are two of the outstanding classic cuisine specialties. It is also a place that feels like not a lot has changed, but we know it has. But you still want to come back today. In other words, and I love this, the fire has never been let to go out in the fireplace. And this is when we discovered this place several years ago. It is a place that I can go back to every time we're in Paris, and it retains a freshness. Okay, the second is a pop-up. I don't know if you've ever been to a pop-up restaurant. I've been to pop-up stores. I've been to pop-up everything. I mean, where I bought clothes and things like that. I have never been to a pop-up, but this was a pop-up that was called itself For the Love of Food on Rue des Tournelles. I was actually looking for a cooking school. When I saw the door open, and I actually made a mistake, I walked in and I had to pass through, because I heard voices, I had to pass through 3 empty rooms before I encountered a living person, and it was the owner of the owner of the space For the Love of Food. The space is where their creations occur. They were served every Saturday evening. It's basically, it was a cooking school, but it was a restaurant for the weekend. The cook owners brought in guest host chefs as well as student chefs, and they cooked a set menu for you. You chose a menu, and they would have 2 or 3 different menus. And the empty room filled up. This is how it looks like. There was low light, so the picture is poor. But the table is full of people. We didn't sit at this table. We were at a table, the chef's table. But it's just full of conviviality, and this is the type of food. The evening I was there, I chose the Israeli chef who was doing a vegetarian menu, and this is a dish. I'll only give you one example because I don't want you to get food fatigue, because we spent a lot of time eating in Paris. There's so many wonderful places. But this is a radish ravioli with chickpea stuffing, garnished with flowers and seasonal greens. Is that wonderful or not? It's a contemporary gastronomy that embodies respect for the local ingredients, which is very French, and which lets the food tell you what it is. It retains its integrity, the essence of food. And so you see, it's maintaining the same principles that Hélène was doing at Trumelo, but it looks completely different. The new is an old idea wrapped in a skin of vegetables, not pasta. It was a very interesting evening, and this was kind of gives you an idea of how the whole space was used. It was very disorganized and haphazard, but it was wonderful. We shared it with a couple. He was from Luxembourg and she was from Thailand. They're living in Paris and working in Paris. We were at the chef's table, and all I can tell you was it was a constellation of international points of view. I mean, the evening was one of those evenings that it flew by. I don't know, we were there for 5 or 6 hours, and it just seemed like we were there for a little while. Okay, now, as most of you know, Paris is divided into geographical units called arrondissements. Our apartment is in the 4th arrondissement, which is just south of the 3rd, closer to the Seine. In fact, Ile de la Cité and Ile Saint-Louis and those bridges we were talking about are in the southern edge of the 4th arrondissement. So just go north and you'll get an idea of where our apartment is. Much of the 11th and the 12th arrondissements and the 20th are just to the east of us beyond the Bastille. The city's urban plan, the architectural plan, is not a grid like many younger towns are, but a roundabouts, which makes for a lot of quirky planning involving many courtyard buildings entered through gates that close off alleys or porticos and allow the residents to pass through private gardens into their apartments or shops. Along with this, many streets are in reality narrow dead-end alleys, especially in the older parts of these eastern arrondissements. This is one, a friend of mine actually lived on the 3rd floor. And as you got to his apartment, you saw shops on the right, a warehouse on the left, a tech service down here. There was a shop, a gallery back here, and you walked up the apartment and you go into, this is a little entryway here. You walked up the stairs again to the 3rd floor walk up. It was absolutely out of this world. I felt like I was, well, it makes you feel like you are in the 100 years ago. Because of this relative isolation, there is a degree of community among the residents, which encouraged some of the professions to move to, and thus these areas developed into work neighborhoods or clusters that specialize in the production of specific items like fashion or furniture or fabric or leather goods, shoes, even foods and jewelry, to give you some examples. In the 11th arrondissement, one encounters business services, tech support, furniture building. It is incredible. Fabric, import, export, which supports the neighboring fashion production industry in the 3rd and 4th arrondissements. By the way, I've never seen a tourist bus in this area. I just wanted to give you a quick view of some of the different types of activities and shops you find in these wonderful areas called allées or passages. So much of what Paris is hidden behind closed doors that you mustn't be afraid to open the door. This is one of the joys of Paris, is going into these, finding these secret areas that are hidden in the 4th arrondissement, especially the 11th, the 12th, the 19th, the 20th. This one is the Passage du Chantier. This actually means it's right off Faubourg Saint-Antoine, which is a fairly busy street. But all of this is nothing but workshops, all trades, all tradesmen. This one is a shoemaker. This is in a different area. This is in the 11th. This is going on Oberkampf, over towards Belleville. And there is, if you wanted to have shoes made, you can go in here, and he's got wooden, I don't know what you call them. They're actual models that he uses he measures your foot and then stretches the leather. He hand makes the shoes. I mean, you can still, and he's not the only one. I mean, we saw 2 or 3 of them. All right, this is another alley. This is, let's see. This one is furniture and chairs and fabrication. This is to order. You can have walls, paper, what do you call it? Wallpaper. You have, this is basically all home related industries. And this is, my mother's name is Gillis. So Le Manoir de Gilles is in my imagination, which gets away with me sometimes. This is an ancient relative of mine who has a little shop in Paris dealing with furniture. And this is a very nice, you can tell from the inside, it's a very nice shop. Here's one, this is photography and photos. This was the alley over by Saint Paul. And this alley was off of Rue de Turenne. And this was, this was the entry into a very, very wonderful gallery, Perotin, You walk into here, there's a huge courtyard. There are 3 or 4 different other, but you go up the steps and you go into this wonderful Belle Epoque structure. And there's a fabulous gallery. His work is just world class. Okay, this one is another. This is again over by the 11th. This is window. But this is like, there's Anderson Windows. This is high tech. This is tech services, support services. So this is probably more the business aspects. And here's one. This is Marché des Enfants Rouges. This is one of the oldest markets. And what they've done is they've taken over an alley that goes around a central building, which has become restaurants and closed markets, meat markets, and things like that. This is where, if you want a belt, all leather, these are all, the man sits here and actually takes his goods and he makes a leather. He'll measure you and you'll get a belt that fits you like no other. It's really quite remarkable. This is a honey factory. This is, if you go through the door, they've got just tons of, this guy just specializes in walking sticks. I've never seen so many walking sticks. Beautiful, enamel, porcelain, crystal, metal, silver, gold, you name it. Walnut, maple, ebony. I've never seen anything like it. Oh, and this is one, this was really fun. I was walking by, right out of our apartment, there's a little street I had very seldom been down. I hadn't really explored it. I walked down the street and I saw this, the gate was open. So I went through tentatively. I'm one of those, and I will open the gate, but it's somewhat tentatively until I find out what's going on. And there I saw this word mercerie. I didn't know what it meant. I'd never heard of it. Well, it's a person who likes to sew. So this was a shop, and it's huge, that you go in and all you see, I'm not kidding you, this is just one shot. There is, you name it and you'll get it. They've got lace, they've got metal, they've got feathers, well, there's some feathers right there. They've got fruits, they've got anything you want to do to trim anything in a woman dress, or a man too. I mean, there's stuff like this men could use. It was a sewer's dream. It was a sewer's dream. And the people were so sweet. They were just, oh, you like this? Oh, haven't you seen this before? Oh, this is so usual here. Oh, we like to dress ourselves up. They put a lot of the stuff on hats and on coats. They dress their coats up by putting these things on, this decoration. But it was a fabulous experience. Oh, and here is a Monsieur Appert. Is a little guy from the Dordogne who came to Paris because he discovered a process of preserving fruit whole in his jams, and he wanted to sell them more directly. And he started his shop, and he also was a baker. He made the best flan. You can see over on the left side where it says potager. All right, well, that just tells you that you can go and you can get a soup in there, because there's a food counter over to the left, but you can see the baked goods. There's cheeses and there's flan, the best in the world, the absolute best in the world. You cannot, and the guy was he's a dream. He will sit and talk to you and tell you, explain the process, and half English, half French, because it takes a while for me to get my French back. So we'll go between, he'll say English when I don't understand his French. I'll say French when he doesn't understand my English, and we work it out, but it's really amazing. And it just happened to be across the street from a museum, Edith Piaf. This must have been on Oberkampf. This was on the way over to Belleville, where Edith Piaf was born and where she lived and sang. She was supposedly born on a street corner, and she lived and sang in Belleville, and this was his shop was right across the street from where she lived. So now I've got to get back to my script. Now, so I hope you get an idea of the types of activity and this wonderful creative generation that goes on in Paris. People value it here. There's a rhythm, a beat, there's a hum, an energy that permeates daily life, at least that I feel, that energizes me. It gets translated into art, it gets and action, construction, retail, communication, sewing, leatherwork, fashion, food making, all artisan, architecture, yes. Even the city walls become canvases. This trellis transforms an otherwise empty wall into a vignette. This abstract in peach and orange covers a relatively unsightly ruins of an older building into a visually pleasant, aesthetically pleasing creation. This is one of my favorite. I mean, the color of the sky happened to be almost the same color as the real sky. And so it looked as though you were looking through an arch into the real sky. It was, I think it reminds me of it's actually a construction protection canvas, but it shows a Magritte-like figure walking up, going into the clouds, which is a very, an interesting way. I mean, that's much more interesting to look at, isn't it, than some old plain canvas cover. And this, I think, now we're getting into some of the more creative, and Barbara knows some of the names. I don't know who did this, but there is a whole section of art, a whole school of art in Paris, where these wonderful creations, they're not graffiti, but they're called graffiti, but they're not graffiti. They're art. And this is one of them. This is one person's iteration. You see Mona Lisa used a lot because, of course, Da Vinci's in Paris, Mona Lisa. And this isn't that, I just thought that was the cleverest thing. And it's probably by somebody, it's humorous, it is meant to be, of course, but I would like to find out who did it. And this is, again, Barbara knows who, I don't know the name, but it's not uncommon. You see the figure, look at, this is the person.
It's Banksy, Michael.
Yeah, it looks like
How do you spell it?
Banksie.
Yes, I've heard the name. I do know that. I didn't know yesterday, but this is so wonderful. I mean, you see people, you walk down the street and people are stopping. They're just looking at it. That is so clever. I mean, the shadow, you know, where the brush is, how they did this loop, you know, it's real to me. It's real art. A person putting a graffiti of a person making graffiti. How clever is that? Here's some more. This is a mural. This again is in the Marais. There's a lot of this in the Marais, especially at the Haute Marais, the northern edge of the Marais. And this, of course, look at the motorcycle. Talk about creativity. This is not uncommon. I mean, you see things like this. And here, by Igor Stravinsky, the Plaza, Igor Stravinsky, again, that to me is not graffiti, even though the lower levels, if they try to make it look, to me, that's a mural. To me, that's art. But it's just Paris actually pays for the creation of what is called, they call this murs d'expression, walls of expression. And in the arrondissements we are talking about, especially the 19th, the 20th, and the 11th, as well as the Marais, which is the 3rd and the 4th, the artists are famous. Some of the names are Da Cruz, as well as what Barbara said, Da Cruz, Kuka, Jimmy Calhoun, who I guess goes by Jimmy C, Lazou, and Dark Vapor, Blek Larat. I mean, these are just a few of the names that are gaining fame using the skin of the city as their canvases, and their creations are remarkable. This generation is citywide. But usually it's mostly in the north and the east part of the city where there's a concentration of them. And the Marais, where the population is so dense and all the older buildings, it's very popular. It's bringing a lot of trendy people in and businesses. Walking down the narrow streets, you have to jump out of the way. I mean, there's these stupid scooters. You see, this is in front of the Stravinsky statue. These little green scooters. They're all over the city. A friend of ours was doing an opening. He was supposedly creating a film at a gallery opening close to the Pompidou. So we were invited, and while the function appeared to be well defined, it was supposed to be a film being made. The process was in reality performance art. Again, I don't know how you feel about this, but performance art for me is a relatively new thing. It's quite unusual. It's educational. I'm still learning about it. 25 people showed up for the filming opening, okay? Some dressed as costumes, and I just happened to get, I had to be careful because I couldn't take many pictures here because I didn't want to be invasive, because I felt there was another dynamic going on and I didn't want to interrupt it. You can see one guy on the right who was rehearsing. They were not directed. They were just rehearsing. The lady on the left, you see she's got her script, and she was walking around like Mata Hari. I mean, she was just like, hotty-toddy. And they were treating her like she was a princess. It was the funniest. For me, it was very entertaining. The participants were given the script. They were told they were being filmed while doing this. And as far as I could tell, that's all. This is that guy who was rehearsing, and he just sat down and he started reading it. And there was the results, I guess, were not as important as the performance. I don't know. We never got to a point of closure, but I recalled some exhibits at the Whitney last year, right along with the biennial. There were a lot of dances had been included as part of the art exhibits, and the choreography and the movement were representing just another aspect of art. And this is now considered, the art of movement was considered an art creation, only in the here and now. And then it was gone forever. But that doesn't obviate the fact that there was an impact on a viewer by a created act on the part of the performer. It's called the art of movement and time, in the here and now, and then it's gone forever, except in the viewer's mind, or in this instance, on the video. The act itself is the art of creation, and that is what actually affects the participant. So I guess this is what performance art is supposedly all about, but I guess it shows my inclination to value it less as art than as an experience. So my question is this art? So that can be debated forever, I guess. So we came out of the gallery full of ideas and talking wildly, and then literally ran into this very tall, extremely well-dressed Japanese model walking down the street with paparazzi all over him. What is this? This is Fashion Week in Paris, of course. And the models and their producers, because they really are, this is a production, were all over town, from the École des Beaux-Arts on the left bank to the Marais on the right. Just down the street, another model was using the construction scaffolding as a prop, dressed to the nines, but the scaffolding being restored, being transformed again, was used as a mop. They would, I find this very, very creative. I mean, you see the strangest things being used as a setting. And here, oh, here's another, this was kind of cool. This was off of Rue de Franc Bourgeois. This at one time was one of the sleaziest parts of the Marais, and it has been converted now into one of those passages that we just shared with you. This is all women's clothing, and you can see they used the graffiti. This is really art. They put this up intentionally, and then they put their models out, or no, who do you call them, mannequins out, and they guided you back to the end of the alley where you go into the stores that were all the inside, and they had all of these wonderful fashions. And look at the people. They came out, they were beautiful, beautiful people with all these wonderful clothes, and you could never tell from the outside what was going on in the inside, which is one of the things I love. You can never tell from the outside what you're going to find inside. Diversity is formidable. One has no problem identifying with something of interest and letting oneself get caught up in the energy. You can take your pick. What interests you? There are so many areas of interest. And then also there are different layers, different levels of involvement. You can be passive and take pictures like I do, or you can actually get into workshops and do more. This is Rosa. This is one of my favorites. I've never taken a class from her, but she is in my neighborhood, and she is the sweetest little woman. She's not French. She came from Bulgaria, but she knows how to cook like you wouldn't believe. And this is the shop. This is some of her products. That door in the back is a classroom. So if you want to do baking, I will set you up with her. She's a real charm. You can do bookbinding. This was at the library of the Arsenal, where you have masters teaching people how to bind, how to make books. This is just some. This you can do photography. This is some of my street photography, and that's Jack. That's a picture I took here. You know, I give myself a little assignment to use color, use something dramatic, and this is what I came up. You can tell, he almost looks like he's floating. If you see the whole picture, this is cut off. He almost looks like he's floating on the shiny, reflective sidewalk. But what I chose to do this time was L'École des Arts Joailliers, which is a school, an outreach program that is run by Van Cleef and Arpels, which is a luxury jewelry. And I have to find this because it's more than jewelry. It is, we did a class on enamel. Last year we did a class on jewelry. But this is down by the Place Vendôme. The original Van Cleef and Arpels was located here. We went down to their office. It's a luxury jewelry, watch. Oh, and this is it, perfume. Did you know they made perfume? I didn't know they made perfume. I knew the jewelry and the watches, but so anyway, founded in 1896 by Alfred Van Cleef and his father-in-law, Salomon Arpels, in Paris. Their first shop was right across from the Ritz. The family had the business for 100 years. They sold it in 1999, but it continues its educational programs in the Place Vendôme. What we did was, oh yeah, this is what we did last year, the history of jewelry. And this is enamel. This is enamel that lets the light shine through. All right. Picajou. Okay, here we have the bijou workshop. You see on the wall is a model of one of the pieces that we made. This is a workshop that we worked at. You can see the tools. It's really an amazing experience. Um, the tools are so basic that you can't. There's one that you see in a stand. One really fine, precise tool. All the rest are pretty gross. And a lot of the very fine polishing gets done by hand with these types of tools, which I found quite surprising. This is what we did. This is our pin. So you sit down and you draw your piece first. This was my piece. All right, you have to come up with your own design. The shape of the butterfly was what we were doing. So we're all doing butterfly pins, but inside of that, you could do anything you wanted. So then you have to, when you have your design, you can see my design coming through. All right, so it's going to look like a beautiful butterfly. And then you put this, you put it on this sticky stuff, this paper. It transfers to, and then you put it onto the piece itself, and it adheres. The design adheres to the enamel that you're decorating, and it's all this really fine powder. And I didn't believe it was going to turn out. When I saw this, I thought, oh my God, I'm a complete failure. But it's amazing when you, well, there I am working away on my other piece. There's Jack. Jack was very good at this. He was very patient and very precise. I got a little impatient. But there's my piece when it was done. And I thought, when I saw that, I couldn't believe. It's not perfect, but I thought, oh my God, I just created some jewelry. And it took all morning. It was like a long process. It was, what a way to spend time. Because you're talking to other people. I met this lady from Iran, and this you talk and you'd see what they were doing, and it was just really so interesting and satisfying. Honestly, you see those two little red dots at the bottom? I looked at my pin and I thought, this needs a little more. It needs a little something. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I saw these big bats, and you know what I thought of? These masks that you wear when you go to a ball that are on a stick that you hold up over your eyes. And I made two eyes. And I put a red dot and a red dot, and that was it. And when I did that, I knew I had completed my creativity, my project. So, and the guy, the director came over and said, "This is very good." So I'm kind of proud of that, given the fact that I had never seen anything like it or done anything like that before. So this is the class, but you can see the class was talented. Here's my pieces on the lower left. Right above mine is Jack's. Jack's was much more modern, abstract. But you can see, I mean, everybody did something that I think was very beautiful. This was it was a very satisfying experience. And this again, I mean, there's so many ways you can experience Paris. This is just one of them. All right, here, so we left feeling very satisfied and having accomplished quite a tricky task and a totally beautiful one. We left the classroom and ventured out into the crowded, very Tony street, turned to the right and found ourselves on Avenue de l'Opéra. I looked to the left and saw l'Opéra Garnier, the former opera house to all of French opera, and Marc Chagall's Ceiling, which I love, which, by the way, the Garnier still is a host to some operas, as well as most of the dance that is done in Paris. We saw Giselle, which was perfect. It was just blissful. The Opera Bastille is the current home to most operas. And here we saw That's Michael Fabiano. We saw Tales of Hoffman. And the music, the music world in Paris, I believe, is one of the most incredibly complex and varied in the world. And I think one of the most engaging. The theater of the Champs-Élysées puts on musicals and recitals. The jazz clubs, this is Le Club, which is right off of Rue de Rivoli, still puts on, it's been there for 100 years. It's one of the original cellar jazz clubs that you went to in the 50s and the 60s. It's still there. There's an intelligentsia that we were very fortunate to have met two people who are performers that are very serious musicians. They took us to what's called a concert dans l'atelier. It means a concert in the attic. And that is actually, there are some people that are music supporters that will convert what used to be a ballroom in their homes into a concert hall and give performances, give concerts. And here we have the piano is set up, and there may be 20 people around. Nobody is back to the right. They're all sitting so you can watch the pianist. And it is, you actually, all the people talk about are theory and composition, music composition, the future composition, and the juxtaposition of chords, and it goes on and on and on. I mean, I never knew music was as complex as when I'm attending something like this. Of course, I know it's complex, but to actually be living that complexity, it's amazing. And people do. Here we are, the girl in the black lace dress was the pianist. And after she was the friend, the two on the left are the musicians that invited us to this recital. And we are talking exactly about what she played. And the music was, bum, 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 boom, bum, 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 bum. How can you tell someone played the right note when you're listening to something like that? I just don't know. But it was, honestly, the conversation was very interesting and one that I will never forget. It was a difficult recital. I have to tell you, we were there for 2.5 hours, and it took every bit of patience for me to sit and to pay attention. I mean, literally to keep my mind attending to it, because I could just tune out. It was so strange. But I'm glad I heard it. I mean, I never knew that this part of the world existed. This is one of my favorite cultural benefits of being in Paris. I find particularly charming music played in the neighborhood churches, either for free or for a nominal fee, as part of their mission. You see these little A-frame signs or wall posters going up all over the neighborhoods across town. It's like a smorgasbord. If you want to hear Schumann, you go to this church. If you want to hear Mendelssohn, you go over there. On a recent trip, we saw and heard a recital of Bach played by the organ master himself at the Saint-Sulpice Cathedral. It's the largest organ in Paris. It's so beautiful. It was so funny. We went to a mass. The mass was at 10:30. The recital was at 11:30. Nobody was at the mass. At about 11:20, people started filling up the church. And by 11:30, the church was full. They had all come to listen to this recital by the organ master. So here, let's see, this is Saint-Germain-des-Prés. At Saint-Germain-des-Prés, we heard the Goldberg variations on harpsichord. And then we went to Sainte-Chapelle. Sainte-Chapelle, one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. We heard Vivaldi. And then I was thrilled to be invited to hear Verdi's Requiem in the Cathedral of St. Louis, the church that commands spiritual primacy over Napoleon's sarcophagus in Les Invalides. It was incredible walking in at night with the lights on, and you could see the statue. Oh, it was marvelous. It was miraculous. Another thrill for me was seeing Chopin's piano, which is in the Polish Museum. He used that when he lived here with George Sand. Street bands are all over, and they really play wonderful music. I'm sure you've all heard them. But when they start playing, Cole Porter or music from the 20s and the 30s, I just have to laugh because it's so wonderful. And here, of course, the Metro. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but here's a quartet in the Metro, and they were really good. And then you also have these hippie types that are singing on the street corner for their dinners. You don't know what to expect when you're walking down Paris. Here, Merle was in Paris, and we had just gotten off the train. We were walking down to the Fondation Le Corbusier, which was another lovely stay. The Philharmonic of Paris is in a new home at the northeastern edge of the city. And it's next to the Parc de la Villette. And the last time we were there, we had to figure out how we were going because the large and violent strikes limiting our movement, public transportation. So it was a real effort to get there. We were fortunate to not have encountered strikers directly, only from the distance, but the damage was obvious all over. Montaigne had reason to worry about the quarrels and divisions affecting the beauty of Paris. For Paris, though a treasure, is not perfect, and there is behind this facade of energy and creativity many lingering unresolved issues, of which the strikes are just one example. After figuring out how to get to the Philharmonic on public transportation, taxis were hard to come by, and Jack loves to figure out our routes on public transportation. We succeeded. Oh, this is Parc de la Villette. I don't know if you've ever seen the River Orc, or the canal with the River Orc in the Parc de la Villette. And I thought it's very interesting. It's called a deconstructed public park. And it's a very complicated discussion to explain that, but I thought it was quite interesting. So here is Jean Nouvel's Philharmonie de Paris, walking up to it from our tram. We succeeded in getting to the hall, and it was like walking into another world. The exterior is clad in an unorthodox metal-like material, and the shape was like no other building I have ever seen. The construction was the source of much contention and disputation. When it was finally finished, Nouvel was so upset by what he thought of his compromises, he refused to attend the opening. I believe it was his loss because the building is such a success. The acoustics were absolutely perfect. The design was absolutely thrilling. I mean, really thrilling. The concert we heard that particular evening was Riccardo Muti conducting the Chicago Symphony Orchestra in Dvorak's New World Symphony. It was perfection. The audience was so appreciative and responsive. What an evening. I was so happy. And now I can think of no better way to leave the presentation on my favorite city with Chicago's prized orchestra, celebrating peace with music during a particularly difficult time in the world in one of the world's most prized capitals and my favorite city. Thank you.
That was marvelous. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Now,
Wow.
do I do thank you? Do I do stop share?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, there we all are.
Right.
Here we
I
are.
like the hippies.
Where they, I thought I should, I wanted to put that in there because Merle flew over and we had, this last time we were there, and we had a wonderful week. And Merle got to see a little bit of how we travel. When we travel, we stay in an apartment and we stay for several weeks. We don't, we try to get to know a little bit about the indigenous culture and the neighborhood, and to the point, the apartment we've been in for 4 years. So we know the neighbors and they'll see us on the stairway and they'll say hello. And there's a cat, a building cat that comes over, it'll come over and want to be pet. In fact, one time I walked into the courtyard and it was raining. So I had my umbrella. We have these big travel umbrellas that are really big. So I went over and I called the cat. The cat came over to me under the umbrella and went under my raincoat that was kind of, I was bending over. So the raincoat was bending down and he stuck his head out to get petted. And he just stayed there. You could hear him purring. No, it's if you want, it's wonderful. Anyway, Merle, we had a good time, I think. What do you think, Merle? You're on mute.
Unmute, Merle.
I don't know what to do.
There.
No. Mute.
No.
Click.
I got it.
There you go.
We had a fabulous time. I had been to Paris a number of times and stayed much more in the places that you all normally stay. And I had been to the Marais to visit to see the Picasso Museum or whatnot. But seeing it through the eyes of Michael and Jack was just so special. And it was much more residential than places I had stayed before, which I liked very much. And it was a very intimate look at Paris. Yeah.
Yeah.
Non-touristy.
Yeah.
So now I can't wait to order French food tonight.
I don't, Michael didn't
And
mention.
I can't wait to get to Paris to
Yes,
that
indeed.
frou-frou shop to decorate my
The
hat.
haberdashery shop. Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry, guys, I need to go, but that was wonderful, Michael. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you,
Bye,
Madhu.
Madhu.
Bye.
Madhu, you should order from MFK on Diversey, because MFK Fisher was one of the great writers about food.
Except
Oh,
it's
that's
closed-
right.
It's closed temporarily.
But they're not doing carry out?
No, I'm
No,
going to
I
go
walked
to
by
my
there
little
days
Mon
ago.
Ami Gabi.
Mon Ami
Oh,
Gabi.
marvelous.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong
And
with that.
Mon Ami Gabi has just announced that they're bringing back Moule Marinière, which is worth ordering from them all by itself.
Bringing back what?
Moule Marinière.
Woo!
Mussels. Yeah.
Mm.
Michael failed to mention is you saw that foie gras on brioche. That
Sweet
he took a
brioche.
picture of? Yeah. That was a snack we made in our apartment. That wasn't gotten from a
Oh, yeah.
restaurant.
Yum,
That's
yum.
right. No, that's right.
That was the other thing that I enjoyed so much is all the profusion of bakeries and food shops. So just a half a block from the apartment was a foie gras shop where we went to foie gras.
Really. Really.
Further down the street was the bakery that made a sweet brioche, and that one was laced with raspberries.
It was British.
Perfect for foie gras.
And
Tell
just
me
for,
the different types of foie. I mean, I think of the normal one. So what were the varieties, Jack?
Well, no, they have the two major varieties, which are duck and goose, but they also have various levels of preparation from mi-cuit, which is barely cooked, to the standard canned tubes of well-preserved foie gras.
more solid. One is loose, one is fresher. The
Yeah,
other-
no, they don't sell the raw liver that you have to cook yourself, which of course is your favorite and my favorite when we go into the restaurants. But
Also, this little shop I mean, teeny, teeny, teeny little shop is only you see in Paris, packed on all surfaces with these wonderful displays. It was just a beautiful illustration of presenting their merchandise.
Yeah, that was Duc de Gascon. They got it's what, and they're all the products are just out of this world.
So what did you drink with your foie gras and brioche, your sweet brioche? What was the beverage?
You want to tell them, Jack?
No, normally we have been drinking less wine, but we were using a Sauterne.
A Sauterne, perfect. Perfect. I'm salivating.
You're making
I
me
just finished
very
brunch.
hungry.
I'm in California, so I just finished eating.
Oh my.
I have to go too. See you all next week.
Bye.
Bye, Ellen.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. That was wonderful.
Okay,
It has made me very hungry.
next
Good.
week, Jack will be
Good.
presenting and kind of some guidelines of going out, maybe.
Maybe.
And
I think, I'm sorry, Barbara. I think what we're going to be talking about is sort of a quick overview of the pandemic right now, and some factors which you may use to make your own decisions about what you will or will not be willing to do. But this is evolving from day to day. I mean, looking at my source materials, I mean, I had one paper that was revised literally 48 hours later. So I'm trying to put off actually writing this thing until the very last minute. You know, but I know you're all very intelligent and you're all following what's coming out. I think I'll just put this in your mind. There's two words to think about: patience and prudence. And we'll talk about why I say that.
You know, something that'd be
What's
really
that?
fascinating is, as you say, everything is changing so quickly. This is even the people who are expert in this, both were virologists, epidemiologists, you know, emergency room, they are all learning every day, and that is fascinating. And I would love to hear whatever comments you might have on how it feels to be a provider, to be an expert in this. You don't have a clue, or you know of really what's going on. That just sounds fascinating.
There's no question that the knowledge base, and I'll talk about this a little bit, the knowledge base is changing, evolving very, very rapidly. I was just yesterday reviewing some of the things that were written in February and late February and early March that have all turned out to be not exactly accurate. And
or not complete.
Yeah. So we are, you know, we're groping. You know, I am not a practitioner, by the way. I've retired, and you'll hear about my history next week. I don't.
No, it's you keep up. You keep up.
No, I am keeping up. I have several. You know, every day I'm actually on the computer for hours and hours getting source material from various medical centers and whatever. Also, talking to friends of mine who are still working. So.
Great.
You
We'll
know,
see you
I
next
mean,
week. I have to sign off. Bye, everybody.
bye, everybody. Thank you.
But anyway, you'll hear next week whatever I have to tell you. So
I'm looking forward to it, because the other side of it is, for a layperson, you know, you read, all right, I get that, I understand it now. I've got, and you may not take on board the fact that the game just changed yesterday, and it just changed again this morning. That takes real focus to do that. So anyway, I'm so glad. I can't wait for it.
anyway, we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.